Hello, friends. The time has come. We are to discuss the end of Second Samuel. This will not be the end of the Bible study. Okay, we will be back for First Kings, I promise. But today we are going to be in Second Kings, verse 24. Link is posted. Hope to see y'all out. And I hope you guys can join us in 5 minutes. See you soon. 5 minutes. Good afternoon, good morning, hello all. For those who are waiting for it, Yosef will be in and out to correct us.
I have a lot of work today, so I will listen. I will be here. I will work very hard not to hop on until, what I would like to do is I'll come on toward the end, and I'll just give if you guys have said everything that I was already going to say, I don't need to say it again. Great. And if I have anything else to add, I will add it then.
Okay, great. Good luck. This is one of those passages that I would know right from the get-go. I would want to interrupt me.
Yeah. I will say, you had asked me if I would say anything about last week since I wasn't on. I'm not going to say too much about the water. There's a whole bunch to unpack about that water story, and I don't have time for that today. I will say though that it's a frame. There's an element at the end of last week that frames this week. So I think it's worth going back to the very end of last week and know where it cut off that list of 37, which by the way is not complete. It has one name missing. There's a whole debate over, did they miscount? Is there someone left out on purpose? Yoav is not on the list, for instance. Or is there a reason that it specifically cut off and ended with Uriah? Right. And the fact that Uriah is mentioned, I think, is very, very important, because that's going to come up a lot in this chapter. There's all these link backs to the language of that earlier sin, and a framing device here. You do need to read it back to back with the previous chapter. Nice. Okay, and with that, I'm going to disappear.
Into exile he goes. So welcome, everyone. Cassandra, how are you doing? How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I'm great. How are you?
Cassandra, always including too much personal information. I'm doing well. Some mixed stuff happening right now. My neighbor died. And that kind of figuring that out. But man, was he an interesting person. So I'm telling all sorts of people about him. Whenever I see someone and we're exchanging the news, everyone's got stories. He was a very interesting guy. When I would have back in COVID days, I'd have Bible study around a campfire so that people could be outside, and he'd wander over with a beer in hand, coming out to party with us as we were doing Bible study. Hey, what's going on over there? And he was a lovely man that I will miss. But also a hoarder and a funny dude, and just so much to him. He was very interesting. Yeah, what's going on? Matt, how are you doing, good sir? Is he going to? He is waving. He is making animals. Mr. Sartori, how are you today?
I'm good. Yep. Driving.
Wonderful. Okay, let's get into the text then. We are at the end of the book of 2 Samuel. We did it, guys. We finished another book. We will be going into to 1st and 2nd Kings, which I love. Big fan. I'll talk about that some other time. But okay, let's go into it. Chapter 24, verse 1. Cassandra, please.
Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, Go, number Israel and Judah. So the king said to Yoav, the commander of the army who was with him, Go through all the tribes of Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, and number the people, that I may know the number of the people. But Yoav said to the king, May the Lord your God add to the people 100 times as many as they are, while the eyes of my lord the king still sees it. But why does my lord the king delight in this thing? But the king's word prevailed against Yoav and the commanders of the army. So Yoav and the commanders of the army went out from the presence of the king to number the people of Israel.
Okay, pause. Let's get into this thing. It's bad if Yoav is the good guy. Joab is appearing as the good guy here, and we've been here before. We don't do we trust Joab? it's a pretty crazy situation if Joab is the one bringing forward God's perspective, which is how it kind of, or is it God's perspective? What? Immediately, I'm like, Yosef, interrupt me. Yeah, insubordination is punishable by death, and Joab knows. God has incited something. He's making something happen. How it's happening is through David. But it's still, I don't know, sin. It's already, immediately, this is so strange to me. Cassandra, do you have any opinions or anything that you can share as I ramble?
Oh, I was just thinking in the version I read this morning, it specifically said troops. It didn't just say people, it said the fighting men.
Okay.
So maybe, I don't know what the options for translation are, but maybe that leads to a clue to what part of the problem is, at least.
Yeah. Well, and that is who they're counting too. It's determining to some extent. This is about military might. There's something about that there. Unmute, Matt. Share your wisdom.
Okay, yeah. It's more like a question. I mean, if it's about mustering military might, why does Joab have a problem with this? It seems like the sort of thing that'd be right up his alley. I don't understand Joab specifically's opposition here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also, like, is this a violation of a rule? Like, is there... I don't know. Like, we talk a lot about how David is, this like creative, intuitive guy who can break the rules in a way that's still righteous. Is him doing that thing, only his instincts are off this time?
Yeah. Yeah, these are good questions. Sartori, do you have any immediate thoughts on whatever is taking place here?
No, same questions that Matt had.
Yeah, and Pajot would line this up with the idea of the totalizing system, the system that leaves no borders. Everything must be accounted for, and he would compare this with in Revelation. There's an area where measurements are given, and to the outer area it says that it was not numbered. Right. And so the importance of numbering and not numbering, of like there being an issue where the king wants to control everything and have everything accounted for.
So was this getting at what Yosef was getting at, how the numbering of the mighty men is framed, and that there's a number, but that number, like all of the names attached to those numbers are incomplete? It's like the mighty men name is an indeterminate system. It's not totalized in the way that David's trying to do here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yanni has an interesting take too, because Joab wants to be boss, and when the king makes decisions, he is not boss. Actually, you know what? Going back, actual Joab, our Joab, who is he was flying. He was he's in transit right now, so that's why we don't have him. He would always emphasize that David had the real soldiers, right? And so, what good is it to count just your regular people? Being an actor, actors will oftentimes be discouraged by the size of the audience. But you'll have days where it's a packed house, but the audience is terrible. And you'll have other days where it will be half full, but the audience is 3 times as loud as like the packed house. Because of things like, if you have a Sunday show, it's all old folks, the gray hairs. So even what does counting even do for you? And you'll have people only half-ass it because, well, it's not a good enough crowd. Is this Egypt also? Is he acting Pharaoh-like? It's
Yeah, it
incited
is
David
kind of.
against them? Yeah.
At the very least, I think it's like so. This is the sort of thing Joseph would do. It's a Solomon thing to do. So when Israel gets as most Egypt-like or most useful to Egypt, I think is what David's doing right now.
Hmm. It's good.
It's David's getting spreadsheet brain here.
Right. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense from the kingly, like world king perspective, for sure. I'm getting flashbacks to Romans, where at the beginning of Romans, it's like the punishment will be allowing us to get what we wanted. So the act of sin in the beginning of Romans is considered to be the punishment for the fact that our hearts have already decided this thing. So the sin, like it's not the later thing that's the punishment for the sin. The sin, like the act that we do is in fact, to some extent, the punishment for where we're already at. So there's a place where the nation already is.
I wonder if there's also something to the fact that this is a way of leading that is not natural to David. So David doesn't know where the pitfalls are because you don't get this kind of massive warning with like Solomon. This is kind of how Solomon goes bad, but I get the feeling that this is the kind of leadership that Solomon is more capable of exercising. That's more natural to him, so he can lead with this kind of information in a way that David cannot. Like this is something that's only going to be poison in David's mind if he has this.
Yes. Okay, I need everyone's attention for a moment. Everyone who says that Yanni is only a troll needs to look at this comment. Why doesn't Joab say our God? Why your God sounds sus? Guys, if you think that Yanni is only a troll, you need to pay attention to how much he is actually paying attention to the text. That is a very good thing to notice, right? Again, so what is Joab even appealing to? He's appealing to David's God. Beautiful. And uses the divine name, Hashem, your God.
Which verse did we get up to so far?
We have finished verse 4.
Okay.
Do you have anything you want to throw in?
Well, just looking ahead and noticing, they're saying that they're visiting all these places that are like places belonging to other people. So it seems like it's not like a census of like inhabitants of the land, but it's like a census of how many people are, Judah and Israel within this still kind of, not fully unified area.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I don't know, just kind of get some insights maybe to what what he's trying to figure out.
I just brought back to you. I was a census worker in 2010, and one of the other things that just taking a census is, it's in the sense like it is drawing the borders around your lands. And let me just say, like, people do not like to be counted, and especially in a place where there is a lot of kind of contested territory, where are the actual boundaries. This is the sort of project that, by sussing out where the actual boundaries are, is going to bring, I think, every tension between him and the outside land to light. By figuring out, like, okay, this is what's Israel and what's not. Then the guys next door are like, are you so sure about that? Like, every little thing they're arguing about has been gone from being ignored to being brought to the center of everyone's attention.
Yeah, also, the promise of his kingdom, that term, Dan to Beersheba, appears in 1 Samuel 3 multiple times. It's the beginning, because Joseph likes to point out that there's this like mirrored structure. So even this reference to the kingdom being called Dan to Beersheba, that's how far this thing is taking place, is it's showing something. Because when it first appears, I think it has to do with Samuel's influence being from Dan to Beersheba. And the rejection of God is what where the kings take over. So it's the same region that the prophet originally ruled. Okay, let's jump back into the text. Cassandra, from verse 5, please.
They crossed the Jordan and began from Aroer, and from the city that is in the middle of the valley toward Gad and on to Jazer. Then they came to Gilead and to Kadesh in the land of the Hittites. And they came to Dan, and from Dan they went around to Sidon, and came to the fortress of Tyre, and to all the cities of the Hivites and Canaanites, and they went out to the Negeb of Judah at Beersheba. So when they had gone through all the land, they came to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. And Joab gave the sum of the numbering of the people to the king. In Israel there were 800,000 valiant men who drew the sword, and the men of Judah were 500,000.
Okay. What is to be said there? 9 months and 20 days. That seems okay. Interesting. There's something going on with the numbers, and I got nothing, guys. I don't know if someone thinks there's something to the numbers, but I got nothing. Anyone have anything to add?
Well, yeah. So I mean, what I was saying? Does that seem like that's what it's saying there? You know, that it's like he's numbered, because I mean that would be part of the totalizing system. Is you don't just count how many people in your land, but you're going to categorize them, and
Right.
you know that could be. And you know, it's like, why do you do that except to make some sort of distinction? So you know, it could be like, you know, are you going to round up some people and put them in ghettos or something, or you know, and it's like if you think about like in Ruth, it's like some of the fuzzy borders or whatever, you know, benefit her. Whereas if it's like, oh, you've crossed into the land of Israel, you have to wear this like Moabite hat so we can all recognize you or something. Like it would have totally, you know, caused a totally different, you know, just the way that people interacted with each other. So
Right. Well, and it is one of the warnings about the king, is that I've muted you, Michael. So even one of the major concerns about the king in Deuteronomy, I keep on going back to this because this is the theology of this book, I believe. You shall not put a foreigner who is not your brother, only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire. He shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And while I think I'm actually thinking of the beginning. Oh, that's good, Matt. He counts them as two different groups because he kind of knows to what extent they're breaking apart. Joseph, go ahead. Correct
Hi, can you hear me?
Go. Yes.
Okay. You're thinking of when they ask Saul for a king, and Saul says, if you ask for a king, the king will take your sons as workers and soldiers.
Yes, they'll be before the chariot. They're going to be your front lines.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean this is military conscription. There's definitely echoes of Egypt. In fact, we quote a verse from this in the Seder, which is weird, and we're not at that verse yet, but it's very much explicitly connected to Egypt liturgically. But yeah, I mean, there's also obviously Solomon, because Solomon also acts like an Egyptian pharaoh, and he does the same thing, right? And he actually will conscript everybody. Like he makes conscripts to build his palace and the temple, and we have this whole labor conscription.
And he marries an Egyptian woman.
That too. But here, yeah, there's definitely all those echoes. So not too much for me to add there, except what I wanted to jump on and add is that it's really important. I don't think this is as totalizing as you think, because you should compare it to the version in Chronicles. In Chronicles, it's very explicit that he does not count the Levites, because you always leave out the Levites, because you should never totalize, God's those who serve God. But also, he leaves out the Benjaminites, which is really, really, really important. Probably more important than leaving out the Levites. Yeah, leaving out the Levites is good for not totalizing, but the Benjaminites, right? Like if he was to count them, he would probably have sparked a civil war, right? Like you don't count the guys who barely have like an alliance with, who've not wanted to join your confederacy, who, were the parts of the previous kingdom. Like he knows that would provoke them, and now it's not clear. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure it's Yoav who chooses not to count them in Chronicles. Not that David tells him not to, but that Yoav kind of comes back early. So they are the 9 months, 20 days thing. I don't know what the numbers symbolize, but part of it is that he comes back early and doesn't actually do Dan to Beersheba, because he skips over probably the biggest army outside of Judah, right? Like they are the biggest army outside of Judah, but he doesn't number them because he knows.
That also seems to me to be a point that's kind of made in just dividing it between Judah and Israel as well, is if you don't consider them entirely loyal, you don't count them, right? Counting them means that you think that they're on your team, right?
Which also points, we can then get a comparison of how strong is Israel without Benjamin, right? Like what is Israel without Benjamin? Is kind of an interesting. And no one has divided Benjamin from Israel before. This is like the first time we get a hint of that. And then Solomon will deliberately try to do so, right? So like this is setting up a lot of the next book and what Solomon's going to do. David tries to do it early. I think you're right. I don't think he's comfortable with scaling with like this kind of bureaucratic mode. But at the same time, this is repeating the sin of Uriah in many ways, right? So there we had Yoav being appointed to do something that he knew was wrong. There he doesn't actually protest exactly, not as much as here. But there's like a lot of these parallels, right, that we're getting there. And then also we have this thing where David, if you remember there, part of the critique was that he was sitting back at home, like on his couch where everyone else was fighting. And he's getting more and more distant from the battle. And here, what we have here is first he had his 3, then he has his 37, and now he has his 500,000, whatever, right? Like the scaling laws are failing him, and he's losing his connection to reality in some ways. Right, and he needs a sin basically will pull him back, right? The sin makes him kind of confront reality and like where he's going wrong in a deep way.
It's so interesting because he chooses sickness. And a lot of people who talk about how our bodies react in situations, they talk about like grounding or things like that. And it's sometimes like if you have someone who is very, very type A, as they say, and like their mind is just like they're stuck on work or whatever. Sometimes it's their body, like they become terribly ill, and that's not how their emotions are. Not the situation. They're not processing any of that stuff. It's their body, them becoming sick that like smacks them and tells them, like pay attention.
But it's interesting because he doesn't get sick, right? It's the people who get sick. It's very Job-like, where like it's the kids that die and not him. There's also you're not at the choice for punishment yet, but like the choice for punishment, so I'm not going to hop on for that. Hopefully, is right are the exact things he's already experienced. He's already experienced the 7 years of war and the 3 years of famine. In fact, this in the ending of the book of Samuel too, right? With this little like 5-chapter chiasm or whatever, 5-chapter like chiastic structure.
Yeah.
So this part parallels the 3-year famine with the Gibeonites that we had. Right, if you look, and not only does it parallel it, but like there's a whole bunch of like little interconnections between that part and this part, right? Like it's not just structurally they're parallel, but like thematically there are now connections where these are framing the songs and the other stuff that we just had, right? These are the framing elements, and they seem to all follow and be connected to his sin with Bathsheba, but also like there's they're pulling in a bunch of other kind of hints, like to Saul and and Solomon and these other issues that were kind of unresolved, right? We'll get there.
Joseph, this is what Matt is saying, who is right here. If David is treating the kingdom like his own body, it is his own body that is getting sick. The question is, does he love his people like he loves his own body?
It's a good question. When I come back on it at the end, we'll talk about why is this the last chapter of this book?
Yeah,
I think that the part of the question is that the answer to that, I think, is what you're getting at.
Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, we're going to continue on. I really do love the constant reminders, just so you know, at any moment there's going to be a civil war. Like we can see the timer ticking in the background. So I'm so glad that we got to spend this time going through this book, always seeing that timer going. Cassandra.
But David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. And David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. And when David arose in the morning, the word of the Lord came to the prophet Gad, David's seer, saying, Go and say to David, Thus says the Lord, 3 things I offer you. Choose one of them that I may do it for you. So Gad came to David and told him and said to him, Shall 3 years of famine come to you in your land? Or will you flee 3 months before your foes while they pursue you? Or shall there be 3 days pestilence in your land? Now consider and decide what answer I shall return to him who sent me.
Okay, pause. This is okay, great. So here's the offer. I immediately am seeing something interesting. So at the very beginning of Samuel, we are told that in those days, a prophet was called a seer. Okay? But when Nathan shows up, he is the prophet Nathan. But we can see here in this chapter again, right? We begin with a story about the seer, but also that the leader, Eli, is blind. He can't see, he can't perceive what he is doing, right? Like his sons are doing what's evil, and he kind of intervenes with it, but his eyes are closed, and you kind of get an idea that his eyes are closed is related to his position, right? And then we get this idea that the prophet is a seer. This is very good. Yes, but the word appears to him. The word of the Lord appeared to Samuel at the beginning of the book as well, Matt. So that is very good. That's one of the things that I brought forward is he's waiting for the word, but he sees something when he interacts with the word.
In Chronicles, it's important to note that he's called Samuel the seer, Gad the seer, but Nathan the prophet.
Yeah.
And Balaam is the prophet whose eyes are closed, he calls himself the seer too, but his eyes are closed. So I wouldn't be too quick to assume that eyes closed blindness actually means no prophecy. Think about in Homer, right? A lot of those
right
prophet type guys are in fact blind because it allows them to see a deeper truth. So you have to be careful and jumping.
But did you say Balaam is the seer with his eyes closed?
Yes.
His donkey sees better than he does.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one where he doesn't see, and then he's related to the sin of the Baal of Peor, right? Where it kind of does seem like his eyes are closed is a bad thing. Would you disagree?
Yes and no. It's hard to tell. There
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
to be there's a clear pagan tradition, at least, and maybe
Yeah, yeah.
Jewish, that prophets some types of prophets should be blind.
Right.
It might be that text might be undermining that blindness is a good thing for prophets.
Yeah.
But it's a little hard to tell.
Yeah.
Say it could be a potentially ambiguous thing, but part of Eli is he refused to see what his sons were doing as bad enough to be worth doing something about.
Yeah. I get, oh yeah, and everyone knows through all time that if you stare at something that is too bright, that you lose your sight. So it could even be, or sometimes it's a secret sight. I can't remember what the name of the rabbi is, but there's a famous rabbi who is the blind? Something the blind. What is his name? When Yosef comes back, I'll ask him. It's Rabbi something the blind. Go ahead, Michael.
It's just so wait, you just read we did read the choices, right? Yeah, we just
Yes.
got there. Yeah, so just looking at that, I'm thinking about you know, why he's wanting to avoid these different ones, and like avoiding the famine. And you're saying there's like a connection between the numbering and like the Pharaoh in Egypt, and it's interesting. So the Pharaoh in Egypt, the Israelites were too numerous, so he was keeping his eyes on the numbers of Israelites and decided they were too numerous. But if you go back to like where did they get their wealth from, Egypt's wealth, Joseph prepares for the 7 years of famine through the 7 years of plenty, but then he sets them up whereby the nation is receiving 20% of the grain, like in perpetuity.
Yeah.
And that is like a safeguard that, for a future famine, because if you go 5 years without famine, you're going to have a full year supply. If you go 15 years, you're going to have 3 years supply, whatever,
Right.
And so, it's interesting, like, obviously, because this is like the beginning of David's reign, or, its infancy, I guess. He's trying to do this numbering thing, but like he doesn't, because he's putting whatever his plan was with the numbering. It was before there was things in place for the longevity of the nation where they could endure a 3-year famine. Because a 3-year famine, if you were prepared for it, is not a big deal. But obviously they're not. So,
Well,
that is very, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, remember in chapter 21, they just had a 3-year famine, so they may not be prepared for back-to-back ones, right? Like,
right. Well, but I'm just saying it, like, whatever, like, so so that seems to make the point. If you've had a 3-year famine in recent memory, and you haven't already enacted some plan of preparing for future famines, but you're doing whatever he was trying to do with the numbering, it was misplaced priorities.
I may push back a little there, right? Because I think part of it is if God wants it to happen, it's going to happen either way. All right. Part of the sin of David that's seen here in many readings is that he's relying on military strength and not God's. And part of like the sin of a military census, is because if you really had God's faith, then one person can out 1,000. What does it matter if you have 700,000 people? And there's a lack of faith here, and that would be true of food planning as well, though.
I also think, Michael, in what you were saying, I was thinking, is David looking at Benjamin the way that Pharaoh was looking at Israel, where they're becoming too numerous, and at any moment they could unify with our enemies and take us over? Right? Like, that's another reason why you count, is to make sure you're safe even from like the Civil War. Do we have enough in case a fight breaks out?
Yeah,
It seems
well,
like
and
a
obviously he
double-edged
didn't want to
sword.
run. He didn't want to be pursued by his enemies either. So obviously
Yeah.
that was a present danger. Like so, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, I definitely agree. Obviously, with the whole thing of like God wants it to happen and stuff. And but I mean, it's it's us in our these are the things from which we can hopefully benefit from the
Right.
wisdom and somebody else's mistakes. Like,
Yeah.
because even, like what Joseph's saying is like, if you're focusing on a military might, well, like that is good, but like, if you become, if you focus on that too much, then you just become like an expansionist force, like that's what you get with like these Assyrians and, all these raiding empires that they have to keep stealing from other places.
Right. Right.
And then when they run out, then their kingdom collapses.
Yeah.
But,
It's
at
a
some point you
Ponzi.
have to
It's a
make
Ponzi scheme. Yeah.
yeah. So at some point you have to make the transition from swords to plows and spears to pruning hooks or whatever. Like you're just, so you gotta and I mean, and that would take care of the famine thing. I would say without it being I guess you could even say that you didn't think about the fact that you need farmers, so that's why like you're really unprepared if you don't even have farmers. So for a
Yeah.
famine.
No, that's good. That's good. Cassandra, you said it's a two-edged sword. What are the edges?
Oh, well, I just mean like then if you're so afraid of Benjamin or some force like that growing, then when you're counting them, you're really putting that into black and white. That you're like really measuring the numbers. It's really like
Yeah.
not firm definition.
Yeah. Joseph, you unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to add? What is the what? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I didn't.
What is the quote from Gladiator? I have enough. I have enough white men of a particular age. Someone needs to know the Gladiator quote. Early in Gladiator, Maximus is meeting with the emperor, and he says, "Do you remember back in the day there was a secret that was called Rome?" And it's like you could only whisper it, because if you said it too loud, it would like vanish, right? There's this like an idea that exists in a lot of places where if you name something, if you if everything is covered and spoken of, then it sometimes it dissipates, right? It's like people have talked about the this little corner of the internet and what name should groups of people have, and is that good, is that evil, to give it names to classify what is inside and everything related to it. Yeah, I've experienced that myself. When I would be interested in a lady, and you have to make sure that you properly refer to the thing early enough on, otherwise it dissipates.
Friend zoned.
Yeah. Don't be too loud about it yet. It is only a secret right now. Okay.
Yeah, well, I guess until things get that name, they kind of exist in that in-between space. Fuzzy, nebulous, doesn't have a body yet, almost.
Tohu vabohu. Waste and wild, right? It's the what exists before God starts creating the world, right? You name, you split. So you name, as soon as you name, you're also splitting things. So let there be creates division, and that's also what the serpent is offering. And the serpent, the notion of the serpent is that sometimes you'll get the word subtle. The word literally conveys a notion of nudity, right? Like that the serpent is the most naked. It's like smooth, no distinction, right? Whereas if you're going like this, I can tell when I hit my hair, right? Whereas over here, there's very little difference because it's smooth, right? Yeah. Yeah, so there's something related to wisdom, creation, but also in us making ourselves into our own gods. Okay, on that note, which I won't go 3 hours on, Cassandra, please.
Then David said to Gad, I am in great distress. Let us fall into the hand of the Lord, for his mercy is great. But let me not fall into the hand of man. So the Lord sent a pestilence on Israel from the morning until the appointed time. And there died of the people from Dan to Beersheba 70,000 men. And when the angel stretched out his hand toward Jerusalem to destroy it, the Lord relented from the calamity and said to the angel who was working destruction among the people, It is enough. Now stay your hand. And the angel of the Lord was by the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. Then David spoke to the Lord when he saw the angel who was striking the people and said, Behold, I have sinned and I have done wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? Please let your hand be against me and against my father's house.
Beautiful. Woo! So you could see it. This is so interesting because you think of it as like you can't see it, but people are getting sick. But apparently you could see this angel.
At the threshing floor.
Yeah. You could see him in a very particular place. Like he was, it's, you could see him. What is that?
Well, you could see people falling down dead.
Right.
You don't necessarily
Threshing
have to go
floor.
beyond that.
Okay.
Threshing floor, maybe it was a foodborne illness.
That's interesting.
Well, it stops at the threshing floor.
Yeah.
It seems.
Yeah. He could see the angel striking people. So that's an interesting image.
Yeah. I'm getting Prince of Egypt vibes. Really like that when
the angel stretched out his hand. So that's the line that we say at the Seder, and we connect it to the plague of the firstborn.
Yeah, for sure it is.
But at the same time, there is this is interesting. There's something unique here. It's not fully unique. We actually had it a little bit earlier with Saul when someone is being good and God, like giving someone a choice of their punishment is actually like an act of compassion to some degree. And then God also relents and he stops early, right? He withholds the calamity from going further. Even though like David was willing to take on the 3 days and to like face the full consequence of his actions, God does pull back. And and maybe because he sees true repentance, whatever, something's happening here where David has got the message, and it is weird because actually the passage seems out of order, right? God stops and then he prays, and I think there's a question of like what happens when. It's also interesting that we didn't say this, but God the seer, we haven't seen him in the book since the end of 1 Samuel. And like, why is it him? We know that Natan is still active. He's going to be at the beginning of 1 Kings.
Yeah.
So why is it Gad the seer that's the one who's involved in this? What is the connection there? And there's at least one thing which is possible, which is wordplay. So last time we had him, there's actually a triple wordplay going on here, or 3 words, double wordplay. I don't know, 3 words, 3 wordplays are going on here. So he had told David to come back from Moab. He was hiding from Saul at the time, and go to the forest of Harut. And this chapter started with that same word Harut, but it uses it in a different way. So there, it's like a name. It means like to carve or something like that. But here it means like to bring about, and then it's also kind of a wordplay with the type of anger that we saw when David got annoyed at Uriah, Charon. So there is kind of this interesting little thing going on here where Gad's role might specifically be related to like, I don't say he's only here because of wordplay, but something's tying it together with this previous wordplay. Like, why was he coming back to the forests of Harut? And why does this chapter start with that same word? We haven't had that word also since that chapter, so it's been a long time. There's something going on that's weird and like trying to point us in that direction. What's this have to do with coming back from Moab and not hiding from Saul anymore?
Is this also related to Bathsheba's first child? Because you also have David pleading with the mercy of the Lord.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he says the same.
Story, he doesn't. Like God doesn't relent.
Right. But you have the same language of of taking responsibility, of I've sinned. Like all that language is exactly the same as we had before. Now the only big difference is that he didn't need someone to tell him he did something wrong. Like he realized he did something wrong before God came to him and told him that there's going to be a punishment. So there is like some character development. Maybe there's something different where he actually guilt strikes him. He realizes something. But when does that guilt strike him? Right. This is going on for 9 months and 20 days. Right. Like, does the guilt strike him at 7 months and he sends messengers to stop Yoav? Like, where does he send messengers and they stop Yoav right before he starts counting Benjamin, right? Like, because Benjamin would have been at the end of this. If you look at the circuit that he took, it's the end of the circuit. So like,
it's almost, I don't know if this is too much. It's like he's pregnant with sin. Like for it to be 9 months, there seems to be, I didn't want to just jump to pregnancy. It's 9 months and 20 days, right? So it seems like the duration of, no,
it might be. There's also, it's a little long, but the other thing I'm thinking is, I have to go back and check my Genesis. Isn't that the length of time between the beginning of the flood and when like the waters start to recede or something? There's something with 9 months and something there. It would probably be worth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pregnancy is really 40 weeks, which is almost 10 months. So it is more. It is 9 plus. It is some. I thought of that too with that number. It kind of was like, oh, that's kind of like how long a pregnancy is, because it is. Yeah, I don't know how what is it? What do they consider a month? I don't know if they're all. Were they all the same days, or was it like lunar months that are like 28 days or 30 days, or so it could be right around that kind of.
That's good. At the end of 150 days, the water had abated.
Yeah, no, but so there's the first day of the 10th month, but then it goes from the second month and the 17th day. You'd have to work it out. I'm not sure. It may not be connected. It is weird. There's more to unpack there for sure.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. Another thing that I noticed, this is just like numerically. So 70,000 die. If you're rounding up, so you have 13,000, right? So 70, no, never mind. This doesn't work. Trying to figure out what that numerologically means. Seems to be related though. Nope.
A lot? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Sorry. I did some math in my head, and I'm not that kind of autistic. I'm the other kind. There's multiple kinds, okay? I'm not the number.
Don't you do math for your job?
I'm not good at the number part though. That's why so many people say that to me. I plug numbers. That's what I do. I don't work it out in my head.
Do you think that they took the time to see how many from each tribe died? Or they just count all the dead then? They don't separate them?
That's interesting. How do you get
I would hope they learned a counting lesson at this point.
Guys, how do you count them? we can't have accurate numbers. That's how we got into this in the first place. Yeah. Okay. Let us continue.
I will just say while we're still on the topic of numbers, I was kind of running the 9 months and 20 days. Like
Yeah.
if they counted pregnancy as 40 weeks from conception to circumcision, 9 months and 20 days is 30, like, is basically the day of birth. If the end of the 40 weeks would be on the 8th day circumcision. So 9 months and 20 days would effectively be the day of birth.
Woo! Which is when the baby died. Because you'll remember it comes fully to term and it survives for the week. And that is when David was repenting for that one too.
Right. Do we have any clear indication of whether this is before or after the matter of Uriah?
It seems
I think with the list
clearly.
in the previous chapter, like it seems like he's still alive. It's supposed to be tagged on right afterwards. Sorry, go ahead, Yosef.
It seems pretty clearly as punishment for it, which means it has to be after. It's also clearly after Saul, it seems, because it's making too many references. So, like, it can't be. The first time we met Gad, like, he was still running from Saul. But this has to be at least after he's king, because otherwise he couldn't take account of Saul's territory. And the way the author at least has put it seems to imply that it's after Uriah too.
Is it implied to be after, or is it a lot of intimations of that show a sort of connection? Because I feel like resurfacing the name of
Jerusalem wouldn't have been taken yet, also, right? So we have to like go in the right order, right? Like there's a number of things for this chapter to work that have to be the case, right? So we know he had taken Jerusalem. Saul can't be king. We can try to probably work it out. And it may very well be out of order because this whole end of the book is out of order in many ways, but I think it'd be hard to argue that's before. I'd say it also has to be after chapter 21 because of the 3-year famine thing, but and that's clearly way after Saul. Yeah. Solomon, you have to think about who's who in which scene and where the characters are. I have to go back to each of those chapters and see what they're contingent on timing wise.
But Uriah was the last character named in the list right before this chapter, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
On the list, is that correct?
Yeah, but Goliath was mentioned in that chapter too, so we know that list is not timed down.
No. All I'm saying is, like, if Uriah is the last one named, then we go on to the story that deals with another colossal sin of David. It seems like it's hard not to see that as an intention of think of Uriah, now listen to this story.
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I started with. Yeah. That's why I said pay attention to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Good stuff. Cassandra.
And Gad came that day to David and said to him,
I'm sorry. I didn't even say, would you please read? I just said your name. I apologize. I apologize. You put up with a lot. Okay, go ahead.
I was ready. Okay. Go up, raise an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up at Gad's word, as the Lord commanded. And when Araunah looked down, he saw the king and his servants coming on toward him. And Araunah went out and paid homage to the king with his face to the ground. And Araunah said, "Why has my lord the king come to his servant?" David said, "To buy the threshing floor from you in order to build an altar to the Lord, that the plague may be averted from the people." Then Araunah said to David, "Let my lord the king take and offer up what seems good to him. Here are the oxen for the burnt offering, and the threshing sledges, and the yokes of the oxen for the wood."
Okay, pause. David never gets to build the temple, which is his desire, but he goes to build this altar. He does get to build an altar. It's this weird fulfillment of his desire. He doesn't get to build the temple. We saw that. Go ahead.
This is the site of the future temple. He builds the altar of the temple, even though the temple does not get built. This is also, by the way, very, very connected to Aaron, with the incense dividing between those who have the plague and those who don't.
Yeah.
In Numbers.
It's so interesting too because correct me if I'm wrong. Traditionally, Yom Kippur, the tradition of Yom Kippur is given after the death of Aaron's sons. Is that right? So this image of the way of worshiping following this like judgment that comes down, that he's building, like if it is even the same location, that seems to be even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, Arnona's threshing floor is definitely the location of the temple. The text says that somewhere. That's not even like tradition of Midrash. That's somewhere. I can't remember if it's here or Chronicles, but that's a whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone want to add anything else before we continue on? It's really this end part that I have. I think it's incredible.
Really, just more kind of a question about the symbolic importance of threshing floors. Like, do they have a particular like weighted meaning? Because it's usually a place where pretty important things happen. Correct.
It is where the chaff and the wheat are separated.
Yeah, it's not exactly where things happen. We know they happen because it connects, like it's where Boaz, like Ruth, meets Boaz and stuff. There are these they have to be open enough for the wind to come. They have to be usually up on a hill, so they're exposed. They're sites of vulnerability usually. So that's where the Moabite and Midianite raiders were stealing from the threshing floors and Judges.
Yeah, why he goes into the wine press to
the idea that there is some interesting symbology that the temple is built on a threshing floor. There's a reason it's on a hill, right? So the temple is on a mountain, right? It's on the Temple Mount. But there is also some kind of like symbolism, not just the practical, but some symbolism tied to it.
Mm-hmm.
I would also say that this guy's name is super suspect. His name is literally Aron, which means like the Ark of God. Right? Aron is the Ark of the Covenant. Like the Aron is the Ark of the Covenant, and is a Jewish theono, right? Theorific, right? So he's a Jebusite. Whether that means he's an actual Jebusite or he lives in the city of Yevus, right, is an interesting question. Because he could be a Jew, given the name. But either way, his name seems very like this is the Ark of the Covenant in a sense.
This is the location. Wow, it's very good.
I'll also say I want to go. Sorry, I'm here. Oh, gosh, I'll go back a second. David, right before this, references the people as his sheep, right?
Yeah.
And then he's going to build this altar. When he says, these sheep, what have they done? One, it's like a classic biblical pun. It's meh asu, like a sheep meh. But more important than that, like silly pun, is the fact that we've had that before. The exact pun happened when Samuel says to Saul, "Why do I hear these sheep bleating in my ears?" And he says, "Meh, like meh shamati, like why hear?" So there's a deliberate connection being tied here to the Amalekite episode in Saul's son.
Which is where he's fully rejected.
Yeah. But and because there's also this connection between for Gad the seer telling him to come back after Saul's right, Saul has slaughtered the priests in Nov, right, and like Saul's destructive spirit is destroying across the land, chasing David, and at that point David ran. He didn't try to stop Saul's destruction. And in some ways, there seems to be like a connection, maybe a redemption of that act here, where he is going to establish basically a safe place for the priests. But yeah, there's a bunch of weird things going on here that I still haven't totally started.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to this Abraham connection with the cave of Macpela. So, Cassandra, can you continue reading? Yeah, go ahead. I think we're at all this.
Okay. All this, O King Araunah, gives to the king. And Araunah said to the king, May the Lord your God accept you. But the king said to Araunah, No, but I will buy it from you for a price. I will not offer burnt offerings to the Lord my God that cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. And David built there an altar to the Lord and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So the Lord responded to the plea for the land, and the plague was averted from Israel.
Yeah. So the bit, Yoav, you have come to us. Wonderful. So the connection is that Abraham is offered, he is going to buy a plot of land for burial, and the people of the land offer it to him for free. They say, "Oh, you're such a good guy, you can just have it." And he says, No, I have to spend money. I have to receive this. Right? There is an importance in paying for an offering. You can't, like, there's something about making offerings with things that are free or things that you were going to throw away anyway. Like, you're not supposed to do such a thing.
No, you can make offerings from things that are free. I think I would maybe connect this to the law of the king, though. Not the law of the king, but Saul's warning about kings, or Samuel's warning about kings, that kings will seize your property. And
Right.
He's basically saying, so I did not obey, the injunction about kings earlier in this chapter. I, learned my lesson, and I'm going to show you that I will pay, even I as king who could seize this with eminent domain, I'm not going to do so.
Which is the
Is this also like
go ahead.
a division wheat and chaff thing? Because in Abraham's situation, like, isn't part of the reason he bought the land is that becomes his first part of the land that's his? So it's another instance of Abraham resisting being absorbed into the people of the land as they are. And this guy's been named as not an Israelite, but a Jebusite. So is he a holdover from the previous land? Is this a maintenance of those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would also say, like, with that, there's, Abraham doesn't really get the full promise. He starts it by that initial purchase, and just like David doesn't get the full promise of the temple, he starts it by this initial act.
Mm-hmm.
He's a part of that. There's also the connection to Abraham, though. I don't want to totally dismiss it of David, because there's actually a whole sub theme here of references to the binding of Isaac as well. Again, calling the people his lamb. Right, there are things going on here. Of course, the people as his lamb also reminds us of Nathan's parable to David. Right, so there's multiple layers to that. But one theme is there's a couple Abraham references in this chapter.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. The place where the binding of Isaac is the location of the temple. Would you put it there?
I mean, according to the Midrash. I mean, Midrashically, these are the same. This exact site is that site of the binding of Isaac. So the fact that the Midrash might not, right? Yes, symbolically it's super important, but also there's intertextual references here to Abraham and the binding of Isaac and Machpelah and other Abraham things that might be pointing to, hey, it's not just an oral tradition symbolism. Like, the text itself is already aware of that, to some degree. We're trying to make it.
It's kind of interesting. It's like, I wonder if it's sort of like, God floods the whole earth, and then he says, I'm not going to flood the whole earth again. So it's like the whole earth is safe from that whole earth flooding thing. And then it's like, this is a spot where I showed a specific mercy. And so I'm going to show that same specific mercy in that spot again. Like, it's kind of it's like the place is tied to that act, as like God's acts are permanent. So he's not going to act against his character in that place.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I just jump into the Abraham with the purchase stuff. There's two Abraham stories that have stuck with me a lot for personal reasons, and one is his unwillingness to take money from Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm not going to let anyone say I even took a sandal strap from you guys, and then his unwillingness to take the land as a gift. That I'm going to pay you for it. I'm going to buy it. There's something in this. There is a price which needs to be paid, and I feel like that is in connection with what you were saying, Joseph. We get an opposite story with Jezebel and Ahab, in that there's a vineyard and they desire to buy it, and the guy won't sell it, so they just kill him and take it. Right. You have this idea of like that standard of amassing wealth, of taking what you want, versus the character of Abraham, knowing that you have to pay for things, knowing that you don't want to become rich the wrong way. And that David is kind of saying it has to be paid for. You have to pay for it. There's something to that.
Yeah, it's going to be super complicated by Solomon building the temple and his palace with conscripts in the right. So in some ways, this is setting that all up.
Yeah.
At the same time, okay, maybe I'll talk about the thing I wanted to talk about now. It's the end of the chapter. We're in the very time is coming. So there's this whole discussion, a symbolic discussion about how. Like things that kind of pre-exist creation are repentance, and then the altar, and then the temple is kind of like one of the things that is called like God's first fruit, firstborn, whatever you want to call it. I'm on the whole list. So these classic lists of kind of like what are all the things that God calls like first of something, and what are the things that were created for creation. This is related to the lamb slaughter before creation that John takes, because it comes out of the same set of midrashim. But here, there's actually a much more kind of literal version of that, where it's not that these pre-exist creation, but kind of before the rest of the temple is built, the altar was established. But the altar itself is being established at the site of prayer being heard and of repentance occurring, right? Of David's repentance for his sin. And there is something we don't have to say, like, again, not pre-existent to all creation, but just like the a priori of the temple is this root of kind of David's final kind of act of repentance, right? Because the next book isn't really going to talk about him repenting anymore. Like even though he's alive at the beginning, like it's moved on from this part of his story. But there is this, I think this is why this book ends here. This book ends with the establishment of the foundation of the temple, not in like they built the actual foundation stones, but like in the spiritual sense. But like this site kind of brings us from the sin of Bathsheba and Uriah and all of those things we've been talking about, this whole fall of David. Yes, he repents. Yes, he's punished. But here he finally, we even despite we just had multiple songs by him and all this stuff, here we finally get his final act of repentance. We can talk about like when this actually happens, and maybe it's out of order and whatever, but it's framed at least at the end of this book, I think, as that act. And that allows us to then have just like most kind of biblical books, like there's not a U-shaped journey. It ends before he dies, it ends before the temple is built, but it ends kind of at the precipice of the land, right? Like Moses dying right before they enter the land, and the book cuts off there.
Yeah.
This book cuts off right before we get the part where the temple's going to be built.
It's such I love the ending of this book. Like this idea, if you were going to write it yourself, right, you'd end it with the building of the temple as like this glorious conclusion. But instead, you have an altar built on a threshing floor, and a hint that it's actually going to come, but that David will not see it. Like this is exactly that. It's Moses looking into the land, and it creates a yearning for me for the lack a conclusion in this, but also conclusion happening in the future.
I'd say it also brings us back to the threshing floor of where Ruth and Boaz meet, and the Davidic line kind of gets established in many ways. And it also kind of brings us back in a different way to the previous chapter with the story of the well of Beersheba and water, because if you remember all your stories and how they might fit together, Ruth is a Moabite woman. The Moabites had refused to give water to the Jews back in Numbers, and then it's repeated in Deuteronomy to talk about that. Then you have this act of repair for that, tikkun, that happens where all these people, like Boaz and Naomi and Ruth, take care of each other and offer each other food and water, and they fix this kind of failure of Moabite Jewish relations from a previous era. That fixing becomes the foundation of David, who's now setting the foundation of the temple, right? So you have like all of these interplays coming through here, but at the same time, there's like hints of trouble. I mean, I'm not saying that like with the story of the water, there's certainly a hint of trouble. But I think one of the references to the sweet waters of Beersheba actually is part of the same narrative that we're getting fully here. And this is part of why this is part of the same like weird little chiastic, 4-chapter end. Is because I think these are all superly entwined events, and they couldn't tell them in the middle of the book. Like the rest of the book like had a different structure. These are brought to the end, I think, for a very specific purpose of kind of, and I think it's weird. Like, why is the plague and the census and the 3-year famine and the Gibeonites and these 2 random songs of David, like, why are they stuck at the end in their own kind of thing? Now it is interesting too, because it might be, this is another point. So in Chronicles, they call the books of Samuel, it seems, they say that the deeds of David are recorded in 3 works, in the books of Samuel the seer, Nathan the prophet, and Gad the seer. So there is a theory that this ending of Samuel 2 is the book of Gad the seer, these 4 chapters. And this is like the Samuel's account goes up to the end of his life, and then Nathan is kind of between those 2 points. And in Nathan, like there's a mention of Gad as like a character, but that's why we haven't seen him really, because he's not really, it's not from his perspective, right? He just happens to be like a side character in that version. But here, like this is the part that Gad finds most important and kind of wants and has a package basically to convey here is the section, is the structure. That's interesting. I don't know. I think that accounts for the kind of disparity in the structures in a useful way, but also like helps us appreciate Samuel 1 and 2 as one work. It was really maybe 3 works initially, and we're seeing like a very composite product that is helping us kind of get into this in a different way.
Yeah.
The guy offered his property to the king. God said, do that. Interesting. I like that.
I'm also wondering about like it being the place where God, the location of the temple is the place where God withholds his wrath, where he pushes it back, where he the force of destruction or whatever is held back.
It's going to be very important in like Hezekiah, right? When the Assyrians go up to, but destroy the rest of the land except for Jerusalem. It's a very important kind of theme that we're going to have later. Is no matter how much is destroyed, there'll always kind of be something. And if the temple is destroyed, then you've like crossed, like you've gone into a whole new territory of problems.
Yeah. Okay, I want to do a check-in with other people, get people's thoughts if they have anything they want to throw in. Cassandra, any thoughts, any things that have just been rattling around in your old cranium?
No, I've spent most of the time just taking notes, so I haven't really been thinking in that way.
Okay, it's all right. Matt.
No, nothing to add at this point.
Good stuff. Then, Mr. Sartori, may I call you out of the mute to ask if you have any closing thoughts on 1st and 2nd Samuel?
It's been a wild ride.
That's good. That's good. Man, I like this book. I like this book so much. I look forward to doing. This guy almost said 3rd Samuel. To go into 1st Kings with y'all. Yanni, of course, misses Absalom the most. Absalom was his favorite. Fascinating. Joseph, do you have any other comments that you would like to give us as we close today?
I've already spoken more than I intended to today. So.
Yeah. All right. May God please help us in understanding this story, to do what's right and to repent when we do what's wrong. Thank you guys for coming out. I will see you next week where we'll be in 1st Kings. Thank you everyone for attending. We have finished another book. Great job, everyone. So many books already done. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.